Medical workers of Reddit, what were the most haunting last words you've heard from a patient? Sweet guy in his 20s with endocarditis, heart valve infection, caused by IV drug abuse. I was prepping him for his third open heart surgery when he sat up, looked me in the eye, and said, "I'm going to die, aren't I?" He did not survive the surgery. RN here. I don't remember this guy's admitting diagnosis. He wasn't assigned to me, but my coworker asked me to help start an IV on him. He needed a unit of blood and his peripheral access had gone bad. I placed a tourniquet and was ready to stick, then he looked at me and said, "I'm dying." Immediately went unresponsive. I checked his pupils, I watched one dilate and the other constrict. We coded him, never got him back. Not haunting, but it went so. This is what retirement is like. He got hit by a car within a few days of retirement, and it has to be the funniest last words. Normally they are sad last words. I was visiting my grandpa and had to leave town and go back to medical school, and I told him I loved him and would see him later. He told me he loved me too, but no, I wouldn't. He was right. He died a week later of pneumonia. Not a medical worker, but when I was 14 my friends and I were joking around before our 7th period theater class. My one friend, who was always a big goof, was playing along with a joke that he and another classmate were breaking up and said, "This relationship is over." Then spun around and fell to the floor for dramatic effect. Except it wasn't for dramatic effect, because he actually suffered heart failure and died instantly from an unknown condition, acute myocarditis. None of us realized it and laughed along. I even picked up his glasses from the floor and put them on to tease him about how blind he was. When I tried to give him his glasses back, I was struck by how discolored his face was, and then blood began to pour from his mouth. That's when the screaming started. Absolutely fucked me as a 14-year-old to realize we could all just drop dead at any moment. It's not words that haunt me. It's the last few agonal breaths, gasping and gurgling, before they are gone. I still remember the first patient I lost as we stood by as per patient, family request. Haunting. My husband is a PICU nurse and one morning he came home in a bit of a daze. I asked him what was wrong and he told me about a little boy who had been in PICU for a few days already and wasn't getting better. Most nights, the little boy would wake up, so one of the nurses would keep him company while he fell asleep again. My husband was doing just that. He read him a book, then just sat there with the boy listening to music so he would go back to sleep. Before falling asleep, the little boy said, "You were my favorite." The boy passed away in the morning. His little heart gave out and refused to restart. Although all patients are important, some leave more of an impression than others. Until that point, that little boy hadn't stood out to my husband and he felt terrible about it because, clearly, he had made a big impression on that little boy. That was the only patient's funeral he has ever attended. Not the very last words, but I had a patient in her early 20s who was severely thrombocytopenic and bleeding profusely for days. Asked me if she was going to make it. I had to look her in the eyes and tell her there is a good chance she wouldn't. I thought she would bust into tears, but no, she just kind of sat back and accepted it. I think she already knew. She died shortly after I got off shift. As a pediatrician, I don't hear a lot of last words. What I can never forget is the inconsolable, grief-stricken cries of the parents when I tell them their child has passed away. It's the hardest part of my job. Hospice nurse here had a patient who was experiencing terminal agitation. With an expression of complete terror on his face, he said, "Help me. They are coming to get me." I work as a PA for a clinic, so I'll never be involved in that situation, but I know a friend who has been. She is also a PA and was helping a guy who was terminally ill. Before he passed, he asked her to not let his wife have his shit. Of course she listens and is sympathetic. A day or so after he passed, his ex-wife apparently shows up to the hospital with several kids saying she is in this guy's will. Long story short, she was trying to take his shit. Not a nurse or health worker, but it is about my granny. She had been in a steady decline, and one day she started arguing with me, telling me loudly to leave. She threatened to tell my dad if I didn't leave. I refused, saying that I would never leave her and that I was here for her. She calmed down after that and died a few days later. On a side note, her husband, who had died 30 years before her, after a lengthy disease, apparently told her on an October day or September day that they wouldn't celebrate Christmas together. He died the 24th December. Not a medic, but my grandfather is dying right now. 92, kidney failure, on hospice. Went to see him yesterday and he was mostly out of it, but he asked about his dead relatives, and said he's hurt more than he's felt good. I told him that he has done a good job and that he's a good man. Not sure if he understood, but he replied, "I know."